if you have ever done something crazy, you felt like God was calling you to, but you just didn't know how to step out in faith and follow him in that. That's what we're going to be talking about today on this podcast. So sitting across the desk from me, my morning show co-host, Jeffrey Dean Butterbean, and we thought we'd sit down and kind of talk to you because there's an interesting story that goes along with this journey that we've been on. So let's rewind the clock back to summertime. We were at a donor event in Charlotte. Yep. One that you led and you asked me to be a part of, and I was there. And you said, tell people what you said to me. You came over to me after the event was over, and we were just kind of chatting about things, and you said...
So what you don't know is I had been thinking for weeks at that point about what I was going to say to you. And I realized I felt like a high school kid trying to work up his nerve to talk to a girl for the first time. Because, and I told Meiji, I'm like, I think I'm gonna ask Carol. This has been a thing that had been working its way through my heart for a long time.
Because it started with her, right?
It started with her, yeah. So rewinding, I'll get to what happened that night because it was funny and awkward and hilarious. So many little steps of faith along the way in this story. So I've been here 10 years as of right now. So last year, well before last year, way before last year, 2019.
Way before last year. Yeah.
When I came home one day and I'm like, oh, they're going to they're looking for a co-host for Carol. And I had already been part of the donor ministry team since 2013 when I got here.
Right.
She goes...
Your wife, Meiji.
My wife, Meiji, says, you ought to apply for that job. And I said, okay, you're very sweet.
Yeah.
And
you love me.
You don't know what you're talking about. She's like, I think y'all would be great. You ought to do that. And I'm like, okay, let me give you all the reasons why this is a bad idea.
Right.
And I literally said, Carol, that will never happen.
Really?
I said that. I've never done that job, sweetheart.
These were the reasons you gave her. Okay.
I'll give them to you just in the order they pop into my head. I have no skills or experience doing that. They've not asked me. They probably would prefer that I would do the job they're paying me for. They probably would like that a whole lot. We don't live in Asheville.
Right.
You have said that, Meiji, you've said to me, because of bears, you'll never move to the mountains.
Right.
That was a reason for not moving. There's so many things that I'm like, doesn't make sense, not going to happen. Never happen.
Right.
But you're very sweet. And she said, okay, but you should apply for that job. Okay. Here's the thing. On the outside, I knew, or in my head, I knew all the reasons it wouldn't work.
Right.
But when she said that to me, there was something that went,
yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
But I never allow myself to dwell on that because, Carol, it would never happen.
Right.
It didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
God hadn't called me to that.
Right.
But it's like there was a little seed that was planted.
Little glimmer of hope there.
That's like, wow.
Yeah.
Because I've heard you, and I've been around radio for a while.
Right.
But I've often thought, it'd be so much fun to be there right now.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be great? And, here's what I would have said. All those kind of things you imagine. You're like, okay, just go back to your job.
Yeah.
Because that's not your job.
Right.
And so she said that. And so along the way, in my donor ministry role, which I have loved.
Yeah.
Occasionally I get to do some speaking things, like in groups. I've led seminars in the past, so it goes back even before my time here. I've done some public speaking stuff, and for some weird reason, I've loved it.
Yeah.
And I've had people kind of affirm that's the thing you're okay at. You do pretty good at that.
What was the year that you did the presentation about listening in our staff meeting? What was that?
That was year before last, so that would have been 2022, I think.
Okay, so at that moment, I thought, man, he's really good at this.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, John Owens,
our
GM, asked me, hey, would you speak this? Anytime I get a chance to lead a devotion, and I've done Bible studies and different things, I just love that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And every year in my annual review, I'd get like high marks on those things.
Yeah.
Which was like, less than 1% of my job. Like, okay, I do this one little thing really well, and I don't do that. And every year, Kelly Brandon is my boss.
So great.
She's wonderful, and she would say, you do real well at that. And I said, thank you. I would love more opportunities for that. And looking back now, it's like, gosh, where could I find a place where I could speak?
To speak publicly.
Yeah, if I could just find a place, and there's a sign blinking radio right behind me,
On air.
Right. If I could just find an opportunity. So anyway, long story, all these little steps, I wouldn't allow myself to even dream that, Carol.
Right.
But there was a part of me that's like, that just seems, but no, it's insane. It's crazy. There's no way for so many reasons. So last couple of years at my annual review, I'd say that to Kelly. I'm like, I just think there might be something. I didn't even say this. I didn't even say on air or whatever. Maybe there's something else. And she's so good. You kind of go out on a limb when you tell a boss, maybe I'm not in the right place. Maybe maybe I'm not fitting exactly. I mean, I love what I do. I want to do it well.
Right.
God's called me here, and she
said,
right
bus, wrong seat.
Right bus, wrong seat. Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that had been kind of percolating along with a little discontent in my heart that goes along with a draw towards something else.
Yeah.
Is like, wow, and I didn't realize this is a faith thing. This is God growing me.
Yeah.
I didn't see it coming. This was not some kind of master plan.
Right.
It's like this fuzzy picture that began slowly to come into focus.
Yeah.
So this past December. So we'll go back now. Before the dinner, after mentioning to Kelly for a couple of years, I said, Kelly, maybe, I don't know, maybe on air.
Yeah.
And she said, have you prayed about it?
Yeah.
I said, no. Is that what we're doing around here now? I said, you know what happens when you pray about stuff?
That makes it real.
It does.
Yeah.
You're kind of putting it out there to God, and it was a limb I was not ready to go out. So it's amazing what a step of faith it takes to pray about something sometimes. I learned
so true.
that. Just a step of faith just to pray in your own private life about a thing. So I prayed about it, and I'm like, okay. And Kelly's like gently encouraging. She's like, we're not going to get out ahead of God.
Right.
It's got to be Him doing it.
Yeah.
Or Him closing the door. And I said, listen, He hasn't told me that's the thing.
Right.
But I'm wondering. I'm feeling this weird desire to find out and pursue this. So she's like, all right, ball's in your court. You got to pray about it and see. So I did. That was in December of the year before. So in May, we had that dinner.
Right.
So 5 months of me going, I don't know. So I spent 5 months going, Carol's coming to the dinner.
And now, we had seen each other's
we see each other
tons of times.
Yeah.
But
I come up for the monthly meetings. I'm here for different things. But I'd never even thought of reaching. I'm like, I'm not just going to talk to her about it.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be great.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I'll see her at the dinner. And so that night, I'm like, what do I say? How do I say this? Because, Carol, I didn't know how to say it to myself.
Right.
I did not know how to, because it seems weird saying, maybe I ought to be on the radio. What do you think? It's like, what a weird thing to say.
People tell me I have a voice for radio. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I have heard that for a long time. I'm like, great, I have the face for radio, too. I get it. But so after it was over, I'm like, so, Carol,
I think your voice did crack.
I think you did.
Hello?
I felt like, Michi's over in the corner going, you can do it. I'm going, this is going to be weird. I started backpedaling.
Yeah,
I'm like,
automatically.
You can say no. You can tell me this is a bad idea, but I just think maybe, I don't know. I'm struggling for the words to say, can I just come and shadow you in the studio? Because maybe I'm wondering if God's calling me to something different and maybe it's on air. And I know that's a bad idea. And I know you can say no. I mean, I was like giving you every out. And because I had no confidence. That was another step of faith in this whole process.
Yes.
Because there's a risk involved.
Sure.
And like, again, there was no job opening.
Right.
There was nobody asking me.
Right.
There was nothing from my background.
And we had moved on from really seeking and co-host. They had just said, you take care of it on your own. And we had that ship had sailed and we had kind of moved on from it.
Right, and I knew that.
Yeah.
I knew there was nothing here. And it didn't make sense on so many levels.
Right.
To to basically ask about a job that's not there, that you are not qualified for, that no one has asked you to talk about. Right?
Yes,
so,
right.
Makes perfect sense. And plus, I'll say this. One of my big objections with Jeff, you're in your 50s.
Yeah.
Nobody. This is not a career path thing.
Right.
This is not, you don't go from where you're at to, you know what?
I think I'll try something new.
I think I'll try something new that I've never done and I'm not qualified for, I don't think. So, anyhow, all these things, it literally took years for that conversation that night to happen.
Yeah.
And then you said, I've been waiting for you to ask or something to that effect. I'm like, what?
Yes. And I had, really, because when you did that,
that's incredible.
When you did that presentation for the staff, I was like, man, he would be great on the air. And we had we had a going away kind of party for another staff member, and you did a hysterically funny thing for him, like a roast for him. And I was like, oh my word, he would be so good on the air. But I thought the same thing. I was like, he'd never consider that because he's a ministry associate. He'd never.
Right.
So that conversation.
You opened the door, and I'm like, what? I was like so happy that, and I told Meiji right away. I'm like, she said, sure. She said, yeah. And so then it was. I talked to Kelly again the next week. I'm like, as you know, because I know y'all talk, and I'm like, that Carol said, sure, let's just see. And now I got to figure out, well, what does that mean? All right, what is the next step? And so she goes, well, you need to spend some time in the studio.
Right.
And I'm like, great. I don't want anyone to know about this.
Right. Just in case.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, So that was like a week or two after that dinner where we got to talk about it. I was talking to Kelly. She goes, well, all of leadership, the folks that make the adults around here, they're going to be out of the office. They're going to be at a conference in Florida like next week. I'm like, perfect.
Yeah.
I can sneak in.
Nobody will ever have to know.
I won't have to ask, why is Jeff in the building? What do you do? Why are you in there with Carol? You're the ministry associate in the Charlotte area. Why are you up here in Asheville on the air or, in the studio with Carol? And so, great. I won't have to answer a lot of awkward questions.
Yeah.
That I can't even answer.
Right.
So I texted you. You're like, sure, come on up.
Come on, let's do it.
And you said, let's do it. So I'm going, all right, Kelly, this is great. Kelly was the only responsible person that knew this was happening. So I said, great, I'm going to shadow Carol for a couple of days, and I'll just be in the background. I'll be like a fly on the wall, watching her doing her thing, see if this makes sense, see if it leads to. And she goes, okay, but just be prepared. She'll probably have you on the air at some point. I'm like, okay, well, I guess that makes sense. So,
yeah.
So anyway,
but you still weren't expecting it.
It was totally
not. So now I'll take over the story because the morning comes and you come into the studio and I'm kind of giving you the 411 on what this is what we do here and blah 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 and like after 30 minutes, I was like, okay, you ready to go on air? And your face in that moment was, I wish I'd had a picture of that because you were like, you were like, you're doing that same back pedal.
Yes.
You're trying to talk me out of it.
Confidence over here.
And I was like, nope, we're going to do this. Let's just try it. Let's just see what happens.
So I can remember the exact break. Let me tell you, because this is etched in my memory forever. You had little things laid out for me, some handouts of like, here's the broadcast clock, and here's how I do some show prep. Just some things for me to look at, and I'm listening to you do your thing. Again, I have no idea.
Right.
And you said, a friend of mine said that she'd already planned her vacation for next year. Who plans that far in advance? Isn't that crazy? Not this summer's vacation, but next summer's vacation. So we're going to talk about that. And I'm like,
we meaning.
Yeah, we're going to talk about planning. And I'm thinking, well, speaking of planning, Carol, that would have been nice to plan. But when you said it, I was nervous, but I thought, great. I'm scared to death in a sense, but I'm excited because if this is what we're talking about, then this is what we're talking about.
Right.
And then, I had like 20 minutes to sit there through the break, think about it, think of some life experience, some story.
Right.
And Carol, I'll turn it back over to you. I want to hear your take. When it happened, it was like, this is perfect. This is easy.
It was.
I mean, it felt so right. I'm not saying I was I'm saying it was the right thing.
Yeah, and you know what people don't know? They just hear teams on the radio, there's a lot of like behind the scenes stuff because you have to make sure that the chemistry is there and you have to make sure the personalities are right. I mean, there are just a lot of different things that can go wrong.
Right.
And I've worked on team shows before in lots of different scenarios, not just in Christian radio, but in secular radio too. And it's just a tender balance.
Yeah. Yep.
And the most successful shows that I've been privy to and been a part of have been those that have known each other beforehand.
Right.
So
we had that benefit, didn't we?
Yes, we did. We had the benefit of working together for years before we actually came together in this kind of sense. But it was, I mean, as soon as I shut the mics off the first time, I was like, oh my word, like. Okay, I want to do the next break now, and it just started, and it was like bigger than we could.
It was like a momentum that just happened.
It was,
and I'm like, what? I'm sitting there going, this isn't really how this happens.
Right.
I mean, I'm a total newbie. I have no idea, but I just know it felt great.
It did.
It was fun. It was like falling off a log, as they say.
That's right.
And I remember texting you on the ride home. So we spent Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Mm-hmm. Nobody in charge knew this was happening. I'm not watching my phone all week going, somebody's going to say, hey, do you know what's happening up here while y'all are gone? I text you on the ride home.
Yep.
I'm sitting there just going, what just happened?
Yeah.
And I remember saying, Carol, thank you. I don't know if that'll ever happen again, but that was and you were so encouraging to me.
Well,
it was like, it was life-giving. I really don't know how to explain every step from that process. And I'm like, and I told you my fears, like, how do you think of what to say? I mean, how do you come up with the content?
Right.
And then it's just the conversations of life.
Yep.
And it just populated itself and took on that momentum.
Right.
It was awesome. It was so much fun.
It was. And it's rare. And the reason I'll say it's rare is because God has clearly called you to this.
Yeah.
And God has clearly called me to this. And to be able to join together and to have the support of your family, obviously, because there are a lot of changes coming up for you guys.
Yeah.
And already started taking place.
Yes.
Is just huge. But it's been such a God thing from the beginning. Like when all the bosses. So after Jeff left, I was like, well, I guess we probably need to say something because people are starting to ask for you now.
Yeah, you can't secretly be on the radio.
Right. We started the whole Jeffrey Dean Butterbean thing, and now people are like, where's Butterbean? Because you would come for like a Friday and then you would disappear. And people are like, where'd he go?
Right.
And that doesn't happen quickly. Like it takes people a while to get used to hearing somebody, and it happened just quickly, like at the drop of a hat. And I knew, I was like, God's doing something. And so I texted my boss and said, we did a little bit of a thing. And if you know Doc, our boss, he's like, try new stuff, do new things.
Great like that.
Yeah. And he wants you to try. And he's even comfortable with you, failing forward and learning something and it being okay.
That's what trying means sometimes, is failing.
Right. And so we tried it. And I said, well, we kind of did a thing while y'all were away. And he was like, great, good job. Yeah. Let's try it more. And we were like, okay.
See, that was.
Yeah.
This is a series of red lights and green lights for me. I'm like, God, from Miji opening the door and me thinking about it more and more, to Kelly encouraging me, to you encouraging me, to then coming in and how it felt those 3 days and we hadn't planned anything. And then when they came back from Florida and Doc being, hey, try it. We, again, there's no job there.
Right.
There's nothing there.
Right.
But there's maybe something worth trying just to see. And
just to see.
He was another. Then I met with Doc, and he's like, "Why do you want to do this?" And I said, "You know what? I just want to hear something that I like to hear. I want to have a conversation with somebody like me, and introduce them to Jesus, and encourage people that are as flawed as me, and the back and forth with Carol. It's just something I really want to do.
Yeah.
And anyway, green light. Okay, well, you can't just try this for 3 days. Come back, and they brought me back for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, sure. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I'll be happy to come. And then it was another 2 weeks, another 2. I lived my life 2 weeks at a time last summer.
Yeah.
And they brought me up here, so they put me up in a hotel so I could just focus on this, be right here. The whole learning how to get up at 3 a.m. or whatever, and how to do show prep. You were so good about, again, the content machine that you've got to develop, seeing what's already out there, Because I'm like, well, after 3 days, I'm out of good stories. What do you got? I don't know how it works. And so working with you day in and day out, and as we went along, they kept saying, we hear something.
Yeah.
Come back for another 2 weeks. Yeah. And that's how we went through June and July. And then the very beginning of August, they said, okay, we need to try to see if we can make a position happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, wow. So it got green lights up to that point, and I'm going, all right, God. Again, he has to confirm all of this. And he opened all these doors.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, it continues to open. We had to wait. We got to know. I was devastated the day that Doc came in and said, it's not a no, it's a not yet.
Yeah.
It was a timing thing, an HR budgets thing, and it makes sense. But still, I kind of wanted it so bad. But God is so good because then I had to wait.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started coming back on Fridays as I could.
Yeah.
Kept my other job that they really would appreciate if I would do and go back to that. And it was... it was just a process of waiting and seeing what would eventually unfold.
So I don't want to rush by the waiting part of this because I think it's important for people to know that when you step out in faith and you say yes to God, sometimes there's a little bit of a pause in there. And I think, we can now look back and say, oh, God was orchestrating all of that too. So let's just talk about the waiting because it was frustrating for both of us. We'd had multiple conversations about, go, 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 go. We wanted to go with it, but there was a waiting time for both of us.
Yeah, it certainly was. And you're right. I mean, it was an important, although sometimes frustrating part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
It became clear that, all right, I need to do this. I really feel that, all right, I think I've gotten a lot of confirmation. It was confirmed externally.
Right.
Everybody this sounds, wow, there's something here that sounds really good.
Mm-hmm.
But now, and so I had to go back. I remember the sadness of knowing it wasn't a no, it was a not yet. However, in the waiting, there was this is still not a done deal. Right. It's not like, okay, come back on this date and get started. Right. We have to get a job approved. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole process. And it may or may not be approved. John Owens was so good about going, okay, I'm letting you know that we don't have a yes, but we're working toward it.
Right.
Either way, you got to go back to your other job. And went back home and was glad because I needed to be home for my family for several reasons.
Yeah.
To take care of the folks at home and to also get myself ready to think about this and pray more about, okay, this is a major life change.
Yeah.
It feels like the right thing. I certainly believe now that it is what God is calling me to do, but I know I'm not quite ready.
Yeah.
And so I had to go through that period of waiting, deal with life things that happen to all of us at home, difficult things and challenges. Go to Ghana. I mean, there were so many things. Our clay shoot. I mean, there was a lot to do. The fall flew by, which it always does, and the holidays. But there was always this. Oh, I wish they'd find out, and maybe we'd find out today.
Yeah, because it kind of felt like a carrot dangling out there, and we were like, oh, we just want to go with it, and we want to have the daily conversation because at that point we'd been doing Fridays for a little bit, and then we had nothing at all.
Yeah, the fall it became very difficult for me to come back for different reasons for both of us, and just in general work schedule things.
Right.
So I'd be so sad when I couldn't come up. I mean, I literally. So at that point, I was back home in Gastonia. I'd leave the house on the Friday at 3:15.
Mm-hmm.
Which I learned is early.
There's more than one 3:15, right?
I didn't realize that other lonely 3:15 that happens every day. I'd leave so early.
Yeah.
And drive up to be here at 5, go on the air at 5:30. But on the Fridays when I got to come back and do that, I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because Carol, it's amazing. In between, in the times when I wouldn't, the doubts would come back.
Yeah, yeah.
And do I really want to? Is this really? It's like God showed me a thing. Honestly, not to make things too biblical here, but I thought about King David when he was anointed as a child.
Yeah.
But yet it was like 30 years before the thing that he was called to do became a reality.
Right.
And he had to go through all the tough times and all the, running from Saul, all the crazy things that happened waiting for the thing that he was called to do.
Right.
And I don't compare myself to David, but I felt a little bit of that.
Well,
sure.
And I think sometimes that we can think when there is when we feel like God's calling us to do something, and then there's a challenge in it, we think, oh, well, God's not in it.
Obviously, I misheard him.
I know, right? And so I just think it's important to mention that there are going to be challenges along the way, and there were for both of us during that time.
Yeah.
I lost my mom at the beginning of December.
Yeah.
And it was almost like, I feel the weight of this decision out there because it was such a good thing and such a positive thing for me as well. I told somebody, I was like, I'm having fun again.
That meant so much to me.
Yeah.
That meant so much to me.
And I know friends would say, we like him. He knows what to do with you. And that was true.
Yeah.
Because...
Can I say something to that?
Sure.
Because in the middle of all this, I thought, this is all about me. I'm going in and messing up everybody's world, and I'm showing up on meeting agendas and it wasn't just about me. And I was so glad because I knew you would be encouraging and kind, but I didn't know what it would mean. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And so that's another way God works from the other side.
Right.
And there was something that he's doing. He's doing things in my family's life, even through the difficulty of the transition.
Sure.
And through your role here.
Yeah.
And anyway, all of that was so, I need those confirmations and those reminders.
Yeah.
As he opens the next door, and we went to the next level, and he got the next approval, and went up to the next rung on the ladder, and all the things that had to happen. And then finally
we got
finding out that we got the yes.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I feel like the dog who caught the car. Oh no. Now what? Now what?
Yeah.
That's really kind of where, and I'm a little bit there now still.
So,
but I love it.
It's going to be so much fun. And the reason that we wanted to have this conversation was, one, because we say when you're listening to your family, we believe that with all of our hearts.
Right.
And we wanted you to kind of have a peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are asking, how did that come about? And then we would joke and say, well, we tried it while the bosses were away, which was 100% true. But we wanted to kind of tell you the story because we realized that you may be walking out your faith and God may be asking you to do something that you're like, I'm not even qualified for that. And
I'm too old. Nobody's asked me. Yeah.
Exactly. And also when you say your yes, sometimes you have to wait for that promise to be fulfilled. And so I think more than anything, it's been a great faith builder for me, and I know for you and your family. I love you.
Definitely.
I adore your wife. She's one of my favorite people on the planet, and we have that in common because you think she's pretty awesome too.
I kind of do.
But to have this walk of faith and to see the things that we've been through, I wanted to share with people because I think there's a tendency to think because we're on the radio that God just blesses us especially, and we don't have to ever struggle or decisions are easy.
And obviously we're all professionals that are qualified, and
and that is not the case. So we did this podcast to encourage you because if God is calling you to do something and you follow him in obedience, it doesn't always happen at the snap.
That's right.
It's sometimes a walk of faith every day until you arrive at that place where God wants you to serve. So that's why we wanted to share this story with you and to let you know that we're so excited about the future because we know we get to serve amazing people just like you.
Yep.
And we look forward to doing that every single morning now as a permanent thing.
Yes, thank you, Jesus.
So thank you so much for listening.
Yes.
Thank you for being a part of this journey with us. And thank you for letting us share what hope sounds like here on the Light FM.